My name is Rhea Calder, 32 years old. That October evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail that felt like it split the air in two. My father's voice, calm, commanding, and edged with contempt, growled through the speaker. Transfer the money now, or expect a call from our lawyer. Each word landed like the slam of a gavel. My hand shook, but only for a second. Then I typed my reply, go ahead. 2 words, no explanations. 48 hours later, my phone was vibrating itself off the counter with 24 missed calls, some from my father's office line, others from a number I recognized as his attorney's. The final message wasn't even angry, it was begging. The lawyer's voice cracked, desperate. Rhea, please, call me back. We can sort this out. I didn't. For once, silence was power. People ask me why I didn't panic then, why I didn't scramble to make peace. But they don't know what it's like to grow up in the Calder household, where every glance felt like an evaluation, every word a clause in an invisible contract. My father, Robert Calder, had built his fortune in Jacksonville real estate. His tone wasn't just heavy, it carried the weight of signatures and sealed envelopes. He'd mapped out my life by the time I was 10, business degree, management track, a future that mirrored his own. My mother, Linda, orchestrated weddings and galas for other families, smiling so wide her jaw must have hurt, but at home her silence was its own cage. When Dad's voice filled the room, she folded her hands in her lap like she could make herself invisible. Her way of survival was never to contradict, never to defend. I used to beg her for permission to chase small dreams. Once, when I was 12, I asked to join the film club at school. She looked at me, then at my father, then whispered, "It's not practical, Rhea." That phrase clung to me like mildew, not practical. Practical was algebra textbooks spread across the dining table while my father hovered, correcting every falter. Practical was economics classes that scraped me raw while my sketchbook stayed hidden under my mattress, until the night he found one. He tore the pages out in front of me, calling them trash with no future. The sound of paper ripping still echoes in me sometimes. That was the night I cried myself to sleep, vowing never to give him the satisfaction of seeing me draw again. Timothy, my brother, was 3 years older, and he wore the Calder mold better. Finance degree, stable bank job. His nods at dinner always perfectly timed to Dad's lectures about ambition. But I caught the small cracks, his jaw tightening, his eyes flicking away when Dad bragged too loudly. Once, when I was 16, he found me editing a short video on my laptop. He watched quietly, then said, "That's really good, but don't let Dad see it." His voice softened, like he knew the weight I carried. The trust fund was the leash binding us all, built from Dad's empire, dangled like salvation. Support, he called it. Control, really. When I turned 18, he offered to pay for college, but only if I chose business. I compromised with marketing, thinking it might be tolerated. He sneered at my graduation. Marketing is fluff. Should have gone into finance, like Timothy. That simmering resentment became my fuel. I thought I had broken free at 22, moving out, chasing scraps of freelance work, trying to find my own rhythm. But his control followed me, stitched into every decision tied to that trust. Then, years later, Matthew Brooks walked into my orbit like a song I hadn't realized I was waiting for. It was at a Jacksonville music festival. He was bent over a soundboard, coaxing clarity out of a cheap mic, the humid air thick with fried food smoke and damp grass. When I lingered nearby, he caught me watching. "You into this stuff?" he asked, his smile easy, unguarded. I admitted, shyly, that I loved media, storytelling, the power of sound and image. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss. Instead, he lit up. "You should be up there making it happen," he said, pointing at the crew. For the first time, I felt seen not as a liability, not as my father's unfinished project, but as me. We spent hours that night, hunched over coffee in flimsy festival cups, talking about dreams that didn't require permission slips. Matthew was an audio engineer, more in love with music than with climbing ladders. "Life's too short to live someone else's plan," he said. I didn't know then how much those words would anchor me. Months later, I made the mistake of bringing him to a family dinner. I thought maybe they'd see him the way I did. The table was set like a stage. Dad at the head, wine poured into crystal that reflected the chandelier, everything gleaming and cold. I introduced Matthew. Dad looked him up and down, his voice dripping disdain. "So you're the sound guy? Must be tough scraping by on gigs." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Matthew only smiled, steady. "I love what I do, and it pays the bills." Dad snorted, then launched into a lecture about real careers and grounded partners. "Rhea needs stability," he said, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Mom," I said, searching her face, "don't you think his work is interesting?" She glanced up, lips parting, then pressed them shut. "It's different," she murmured. Her silence landed harder than Dad's contempt. I turned to Timothy. He shifted in his seat, eyes flicking to Dad before he muttered something about his workload, changing the subject entirely. "Tim, how's the bank?" Dad jumped in, satisfied. The conversation rolled on without me, without us. Matthew squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. That night, driving home, I asked him, sharper than I meant, "Why didn't you push back harder?" He sighed. "I didn't want to make it worse for you." Worse. That was the word. He didn't understand that silence was the worst. It had been my whole childhood. Lying awake that night, replaying Dad's sneer, Mom's silence, Tim's cowardice, I realized something had to change. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about every moment I had let them define me. The voicemail, the threats, the 24 missed calls, they weren't just about money. They were the spark on a fuse that had been laid through my entire life. And I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. This time, I would act. Because maybe the voicemail wasn't a warning. Maybe it was an invitation. And I was ready to accept. The voicemail had cracked open a door I couldn't close. Every message since was a reminder. If I wanted to breathe, I had to step through it. The Calder Trust was never charity. It was a cage gilded with dollar signs. And I had walked into it willingly, thinking I could keep my dreams alive by taking my father's help. My media startup had been proof that I could build something of my own. Small contracts, promo videos for local shops, a team of scrappy editors who believed in stories. But when the bills piled up and clients paid late, I accepted his money. He didn't just hand me a check. He pulled out paperwork, clauses, signatures. "We're partners now," he'd said, his smile stiff as lacquer. Partners. In reality, every decision became a board meeting. Want to hire a new editor? He demanded resumes, then vetoed them. Pitch a bold campaign? Too risky, he snapped. I'd built my dream, only to find it shackled again. This time, not by lectures, but by contracts. Then came his ultimatum. Postpone the wedding. "You're not stable enough," he said from his office, property deeds framed on the wall behind him like trophies. "Focus on the business. Marriage is a distraction." I stood there, stunned. "Dad, this isn't a quarterly report. This is my life." "The trust is funding your life," he said coolly. "If you want to keep it, you'll listen." The words left a metallic taste in my mouth. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a leash pulled tight. I refused. When I told Matthew that night, pacing our apartment with fury in my veins, I expected him to match my outrage. "Can you believe him?" I demanded. Matthew leaned against the counter, arms folded, his calmness irritatingly steady. "He's bluffing. He won't let your company tank. It's his money, too." But I knew better. My father never bluffed. The fight between us simmered for days. Then one evening, Matthew came home hours late. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed. He wouldn't say where he'd been. He stood in our living room, shoulders heavy, voice breaking in ways I'd never heard. "I can't do this anymore, Rhea," he said, not looking at me. "You're better off without me. I'm setting you free." The words gutted me. "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked. "Is this about my father? Did something happen today?" He shook his head. "I'm just not enough for you." Before I could stop him, he grabbed his jacket and walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving silence that roared in my ears. I called. I texted. Nothing. The man who'd once stayed up all night with me, editing footage on a dying laptop, who told me my dreams weren't foolish, gone with no explanation. I couldn't stay in the apartment. Every corner reeked of memory. So I drove to Caitlin Walsh's condo, hands shaking on the wheel. Caitlin had been my best friend since college, a real estate lawyer with sharp wit and the kind of loyalty my family never offered. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug. "You're staying here," she said simply, no questions asked. The next morning, over bitter coffee, I finally spilled everything. My father's threats, the trust's grip, Matthew's sudden goodbye. My words trembled, my mug rattling against the table. Caitlin listened, her brow furrowed, her lawyer's brain already turning. "That's not Matthew," she said firmly. "He doesn't give up unless someone forced him to. Someone got to him." Her words hit me like a jolt. Could it have been Dad? Maybe Mom, in her quiet, suffocating way. I had no proof, just the gnawing certainty that Matthew's absence wasn't entirely his choice. Caitlin leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then cut the leash. If the trust is the chain, you need to break it." "How?" I whispered. She grabbed a pen, started sketching on a legal pad. "Buyout. You replace their investment, prove independence, and take back your company. It won't be easy, but it's possible." For the first time in weeks, something sparked in me that wasn't fear, it was resolve. But the trust wasn't simple. My father had layered it with riders, loopholes, traps disguised as protections. And even as Caitlin talked me through the steps, I knew there were hidden claws waiting. That night, my phone lit up at 12:37 a.m. An unknown number, a voicemail. I pressed play. Static. Then Matthew's voice, raw and low. He said my name once, Rhea, before the line went dead. No explanation. Just silence, and then a click, like someone had ended the call for him. I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone searing my hands, my heart pounding. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was, it had only just begun. The morning after that voicemail, I couldn't shake the sound of Matthew's voice, the way he'd said my name, soft and strained, like someone had a hand around his throat. I played it again and again until Caitlin finally took my phone and set it face down. "Obsessing over it won't give you answers," she said. "We need proof, documents, something your father can't twist." Proof. That's what had always been missing. My father's control lived in shadows. Conversations behind closed doors, unsigned ultimatums, silences that suffocated. If I wanted out, I'd need more than outrage. I'd need paper. That's when Timothy showed up. He knocked on Caitlin's condo door, his suit still crisp from work, but his eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. For a moment, I thought he was there to drag me home, Dad's messenger in banker's clothing. But he stepped inside, looked around nervously, and said, "I saw what Dad's been doing to you. It's not right." I stared at him, stunned. "You've been nodding along for years, Tim. Now you suddenly care?" His jaw tightened. "You think it's easy for me? You think I haven't swallowed my pride 100 times just to keep peace? But watching him threaten you, watching Matthew walk away, it crossed a line." He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, placing it on Caitlin's glass coffee table like it was a live explosive. "This is everything," he said quietly. "Bank statements, investment logs, even the riders on the trust Dad never wanted you to see." I felt my breath catch. "Tim, if he finds out you took this..." "I know," he cut me off. "I'll deal with it. You deserve to be free." It was the first time in my life my brother had stood on my side without hesitation, and for a second, I saw the boy who once whispered, "Don't let Dad see," when he caught me editing a video. Caitlin wasted no time. She plugged the drive into her laptop, her eyes flicking across spreadsheets and scanned documents, her lawyer's precision slicing through numbers like a scalpel. "He buried you," she muttered. "Clauses tying your every decision to trustee approval. And look at this, moral jeopardy rider. If a beneficiary's actions are deemed against family interest, the trustee can freeze access." "Moral jeopardy?" I echoed, my stomach twisting. "It's vague by design," Caitlin said. "If he doesn't like who you marry, the projects you take, the people you hire, he can claim it's against family interest and cut you off." "That's legal?" Timothy's voice was low. "Barely, but Dad's lawyers are creative." That's when Caitlin made the call. "We need someone who knows these clauses inside out. Someone who's seen corporate transfers like this before." That's how Patricia Foster entered the picture. She was a bank compliance officer, sharp-eyed, with a calm that could quiet a storm. She met us in a fluorescent-lit office downtown, flipping through the documents Timothy had given me. Her red pen circled terms, drew arrows, built a roadmap. "The trust is complicated," she said evenly, "but not impossible. You can buy them out if you secure clean financing to replace their stake. We'll need a neutral attorney to oversee the transaction, someone respected enough that your father can't bulldoze through." Her words steadied me. For the first time, there was a plan that didn't end with me begging for scraps. But the deeper we dug, the stranger it got. Patricia pointed at one column of transactions. "Here, same-day deposits into the trust from a Shell LLC. Look at the name, L&R Holdings. Doesn't ring a bell? Timothy frowned. That's not one of Dad's companies. Patricia leaned back. Then someone else is patching holes. Quietly. And from the amounts, it looks like the trust is bleeding more than your father admits. Caitlin caught my eye. If the trust is unstable, that makes him even more dangerous. He'll cling harder. I swallowed hard. The thought of Dad losing control of his empire. It didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me uneasy. What would a man like him do if he thought everything was slipping away? That night, I stayed awake with the USB drive in my hand, its weight heavier than it should have been. Inside was every secret he never meant for me to see. Inside was my way out, or my family's destruction. Timothy sat across from me, nursing a beer, his tie loosened. You should know, he said quietly. A year ago, I voted to tighten oversight on your company. Dad said it was to protect family assets. I thought maybe he was right. I didn't realize how much it would choke you. His admission stung, but it also felt real. Not the polished banker version of him, but the brother who finally let the guilt show. Why are you helping me now? I asked. Because, he said, staring into his drink, I can't watch you drown anymore, and maybe I'm tired of pretending obedience doesn't cost me, too. We sat in silence after that, the weight of years between us, but something shifting. For once, I wasn't entirely alone. By the end of the week, Patricia had a strategy drafted, a buyout agreement, financing lined up, every clause countered. All that was left was the confrontation. The date was set. The location, Stephen Clark's office downtown, a seasoned attorney who handled high-stakes disputes with a reputation for neutrality. I received the confirmation email at 9:12 p.m. My father had replied to the invite with just 3 words. Bring your witnesses. The day of the showdown, Jacksonville's downtown skyline glinted like glass blades under a pale sun. I clutched the folder Caitlin had prepared, my knuckles white around its edges. We'd gone over every clause, every possible ambush. Still, walking into Stephen Clark's office felt like stepping onto a stage where the script could turn against me at any second. Stephen's conference room was sleek and cold. Polished mahogany table, walls lined with framed legal precedents, blinds drawn to shut out the world. Patricia Foster was already there, organized, unflappable, her red pen resting neatly atop a stack of documents. Caitlin stood beside me, her presence steady, like a shield. Breathe, she murmured as we sat. Nerves won't win this fight, paper will. Then the door opened. Robert Calder entered first, his posture sharp, jaw set, eyes scanning the room like he owned it. Behind him, Linda moved quietly, her hands folded tight, the smell of her perfume, gardenia, and hairspray hitting me like childhood all over again. She didn't meet my eyes. Let's get on with it, Robert said, dropping a leather folio onto the table with a slap. Stephen cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the transfer of investment shares in Miss Calder's company. Everyone will have a chance to speak. My father leaned back, smirking. She's making a mistake. Without my guidance, she'll run that company into the ground. I forced my voice steady. I built it. I'll protect it. I don't need your guidance or your money. Caitlin slid the buyout papers across the table. The financing is secured. All contractual obligations are met. She's exercising her right to repurchase. Robert didn't even glance at the documents. Instead, he opened his folio and produced a stapled set of papers. You forgot this. He pushed it forward. The heading glared at me. Reversion freeze rider. Patricia's pen tapped against her notes. What's this? Robert's smile was razor thin. A clause filed with the trust 2 years ago. If a beneficiary takes actions that cause reputational harm to the family, the trustee can freeze all distributions, including personal accounts, effective immediately. My stomach dropped. Caitlin snatched the document, scanning fast. This wasn't disclosed in prior statements. Robert's voice was smug. Because it wasn't your business. His eyes cut to me. One wrong headline about you, one scandal tied to that little company, and you'll be penniless. Do you really want to risk that? For a moment, fear threatened to swallow me whole, but then I remembered Matthew's face, the way he'd walked away without explanation. I remembered the torn pages of my sketchbook, every silence, every chain. Fear was his currency. I wasn't buying it anymore. I met his gaze. You didn't fund me. You funded control. I won't play by your rules anymore. Linda flinched at my words. Her hands twisted in her lap. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, Rhea, we can work this out as a family. I turned to her, my throat tight. Families don't require forfeiture. Her eyes shimmered, but she said nothing more. Patricia cleared her throat, steady and cool. The replacement financing has already been deposited into escrow. The buyout is valid. The rider doesn't apply to ownership transfer. It only applies to trust distributions, which, after this, she won't need. Stephen nodded. The buyout agreement is airtight. Once signed, the trust relinquishes all claims to the company. For the first time, my father's smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed as Patricia slid the documents back toward him. Sign, Caitlin said flatly. Robert picked up the pen, twirling it between his fingers. You think you're clever. You'll see soon enough. You don't have the strength to run this without me. Then let me fail on my own terms, I said quietly. The silence stretched until finally, with a sharp stroke, he signed his name. Linda signed next, her hand trembling so badly the ink smudged. It was done. The chain snapped. But as Patricia gathered the papers, she froze. Her eyes flicked to a notification on her phone, then to me. The trust just received a wire transfer, she whispered. From Eleanor Holdings. $500,000. Today. Caitlin's eyes darted to mine. They're patching holes again. My father stood, buttoning his jacket with a sharp motion. Enjoy your independence, Rhea. Let the market grade you. As he walked out, he pulled his phone from his pocket and barked into it. Blacklist her. Vendors, distributors, all of them. She's cut off. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my phone, typed the same 2 words I'd sent before, and hit send. Go ahead. His footsteps paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to know he'd seen it. The door closed, and I exhaled free, but with a new question burning in my gut. Who was propping up the trust? Because if Robert was bleeding money this badly, someone else was keeping him afloat. And that meant my war with him wasn't over, it was only shifting. 8 months later, the air felt different, lighter, sharper. My company was leaner now, no longer swollen by my father's money, but alive with its own pulse. We'd landed a contract with a local news outlet, and my team joked about surviving on adrenaline and diner coffee. Every client paid felt like proof that freedom wasn't just an idea, it was tangible. But freedom carried a shadow. My parents had gone silent since the buyout. No voicemails, no Sunday dinners, no unexpected visits. From the outside, it looked like I had won. Yet I knew Robert Calder didn't lose quietly. The first time I saw Matthew again, I wasn't prepared. It was a late spring evening at a media networking event in Memorial Park. Fairy lights strung across trees flickered as the river rolled dark and slow beside us. I was talking with a journalist when I felt it, a gaze too familiar. I turned, and there he was. Matthew stood near the edge of the crowd, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, his posture hesitant. For a moment, I couldn't move. My breath caught like it used to when I saw him bent over a soundboard, grinning up at me. He approached slowly. Rhea, he said, his voice careful. Can we talk? My chest tightened. After 8 months, that's what you lead with? He winced, but nodded. I owe you the truth. We stepped away from the chatter, into the dim hush by the river. He shifted, restless, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. It wasn't me, he said finally. Your parents. They came to me. They said I was holding you back. That if I stayed, I'd ruin your future. That the trust could collapse if you kept fighting. Your mom... His voice cracked on the word. Linda begged me. Said breaking things off was the only way to protect you. My stomach dropped. My mother? He nodded. She came alone. She was scared. She said Robert was over-leveraged, that the trust wasn't stable, that if you tied yourself to me, someone outside the Calder mold, you'd be dragged down when everything fell apart. She thought pushing me away was mercy. I stared at him, the pieces sliding into place with horrifying clarity. The shell company, the sudden wire transfers, the reversion clause. Dad had been bleeding money. And Mom, she had tried to save me in the only twisted way she knew. You could have told me, I whispered. I thought if I did, you'd fight harder. I thought you'd hate me less than you'd hate them. He laughed bitterly. I was wrong. My throat tightened. Do you know what it did to me? Wondering why you left? Believing I wasn't enough? His eyes met mine then, raw and unguarded. You were always enough. That was the problem. They knew you wouldn't bend if you had someone beside you. For a moment, the world tilted. The betrayal didn't feel sharp and clean. It was muddied by love, fear, misguided protection. My father had acted from control, but my mother, she had acted from desperation. And Matthew, he had acted from love, twisted into silence. Later that week, Timothy confirmed it. We met at a quiet cafe, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. You're right, he said, stirring his coffee absently. The trust's in trouble. Dad over-leveraged during the last property cycle. He's been patching holes with short-term loans, moving money through shell accounts. L&R Holdings? That's Mom's event company's vendor list. She let him funnel payments through her books. My chest ached. So she's not just complicit, she's keeping him afloat. Timothy nodded. And if it collapses, it could take her down too, legally. The moral dilemma lodged itself in me like glass. Do I expose them, let the truth unravel and watch my parents lose everything? Or walk away knowing their empire rests on lies? Caitlin didn't sugarcoat it. You can't ignore this. If the bank finds those irregularities without your disclosure, you'll look complicit. But scorched earth isn't the only option. Quiet compliance reporting, no press. Let the system deal with it. That night, I filed a report with the trust's outside accountants, attaching Timothy's documents. My hands shook, but I hit send. It wasn't vengeance, it was survival. Days later, I found myself sitting on a church bench at twilight, waiting. Linda had asked to see me. When she arrived, she looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders curved, her hair pinned too tight. I wanted to explain, she said, her voice trembling. When I asked Matthew to walk away, it wasn't because I hated him. It was because I knew your father's empire was cracking. I thought if you distanced yourself, you'd be spared when it fell. My throat burned. Do you hear yourself, Mom? Love isn't forcing silence. Love is consent. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought love was safety. I shook my head. Safety without choice isn't love. We sat there, the distance between us, heavy and unbridgeable. When she finally stood, we didn't hug. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left. The park smelled of honeysuckle and damp earth that morning, the kind of scent that clings to memory. String lights swung gently between the branches. Glass jars filled with thrifted flowers lined the benches, and my closest friends buzzed around with the easy laughter of people who had chosen to be here. It wasn't the lavish wedding my parents had always envisioned. No sprawling venue, no tower of champagne flutes. It was smaller, stripped down, luminous. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for that. Matthew stood at the end of the aisle, his smile hesitant but steady. He looked like the man I first met at the festival, the one who believed in my dream without blinking. The months of silence and secrets hadn't vanished, but they'd softened into something we could hold without it cutting us. When we spoke our vows, my voice didn't shake. I promised him not perfection, but presence. Not obedience, but partnership. His words mirrored mine. No conditions, no chains. None of the Calder family was there. Robert hadn't called since the buyout, though I heard whispers through industry contacts that his empire was cracking. Over-leveraged deals, investigations into those shell companies, vendors pulling away. His name no longer carried the same weight at Jacksonville boardrooms. Linda. She hadn't spoken to me since that night on the church bench, but I couldn't stop replaying her words. I thought love was safety. There was something tragic in them, something that would haunt me long after. Timothy testified when the auditors came calling. He told the truth even when it put him at risk. It cost him promotions, maybe even his relationship with our father, but I saw something freer in him afterward, like he'd finally stopped holding his breath. My company grew, slowly but surely. We weren't splashed across billboards, but we told stories that mattered, and people noticed. Every contract signed, every client won, felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. One night, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single page, yellowed around the edges, familiar in a way that made my breath catch. It was one of my old sketchbook pages. A rough pencil drawing I'd made at 12 of a girl sitting at a film reel, light bursting out of the frames like stars. The one I thought my father had torn and destroyed. There was no note, only that page. But I knew who had sent it. Linda. She hadn't been able to stand beside me, not fully, but she had saved this scrap of me, tucked it away for years, and sent it when words failed her. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, it was remembrance. A quiet acknowledgement. I saw you. I always saw you. I framed the page above my desk. Every time I looked at it, I felt the weight of everything I'd lost, and everything I had built in its place. Robert's control had shaped me. Linda's silence had scarred me. Matthew's absence had gutted me. But none of them owned me anymore. I owned me. The cost of freedom had been steep. The fracture of a family, the unraveling of illusions. The grief of knowing love and betrayal can live in the same house. But as I sat at my desk, the framed sketch glowing in the soft morning light, Matthew humming in the kitchen, the scent of coffee rising, I realized something simple. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. And for the first time, my life wasn't a contract written by someone else's hand. It was mine.